Malekith, the Witch King of Negorond, leads his exiled people from the frozen north in the hopes of one day taking back his rightful throne of Ulthuan. For thousands of years, he has led a crusade against the High Elves, biding his time for the opportune moment to strike while watching his back for treachery and the insidious plans of his so-called allies. If you like heavy metal, sexy elves in bondage gear, and some morally questionable political stances, then rise up, my dark elf brethren, and reclaim your homeland for the Druchii. In the lore, Malekith has been around for a very long time. He was one of two children born to Anarion, the very first elven king, but he didn't want the throne himself. Unfortunately, his mother Morathi, another of the playable lords, thought differently, and would spend her equally long life doing everything she could to make it so. In a failed coup against his brother, Malekith was burned alive by the flames of Asuryan, a sacred ritual that chose who was worthy of the crown. In order to survive, he fled to the frozen north and had his iconic armor of midnight forged and fused to his body for all eternity. And so begins our very long journey to reconquer sunny Ulthuan and take back the throne. 10 generations of Phoenix Kings would rise and fall as Malekith struck time and time again against his homeland, only to be inevitably pushed back into the sea. Eventually, he would stop trying to rule Ulthuan and simply destroy it, a feat that only his mother would accomplish. During the end times, Ulthuan sinks deep into the sea after the Great Vortex unbinds, but Malekith does become the Eternity King, uniting High Elf, Dark Elf, and Wood Elf together under one banner to stand against the might of chaos. Spoiler alert, they fail. In Total War Warhammer, his faction ability is the Witch King of Negoroth. This provides a unique shared XP gain, as Malekith was known for wisely delegating his lords to look over their cities. A Diplo penalty with the Exiles of Nehek because the developers hate this faction, and a Diplo bonus with Cult of Pleasure because Malekith loves his mommy. Lastly, we get a loyalty bonus to new lords since Druchii lived to put Malekith back on the throne, and a chance of betrayal for higher rank lords because Druchii love to stab each other in the back. Malekith himself gets a likewise named trait which simply provides an upkeep reduction for your standard frontline infantry. After all, a king needs an army. The Druchii believe in Malekith's cause, but they also respect military might, so balance yourself accordingly and ensure that this invasion of Ulthuan is the last. When building his skill tree, I recommend focusing on the red line first for improved Dark Shards and then the Blackguard bonuses. Your starting capital gets access to Blackguard with improved ranks and recruitment, so they'll make up an unwavering front line for most of the game. Dark Shards with shields are recruitable very early on and scale exceptionally well even into the end game. If you're playing as Malekith from the start, I recommend the War Leader tree, but if you've confederated him, then the Tyrant tree is probably more useful. After that, you can split between yellow lines. I prefer to focus on the melee points as Malekith is very strong on his dragon, and you can always add additional spellcasters into your army to make up the rest. Alternatively, you can drop the spells entirely for Dread Slaver and Lightning Strike, but it's less commonly needed when you're fighting the High Elves. For research, you'll likewise want to focus on Dark Shards and Blackguards, but balanced with upgrades for your cities and slave income. Monstrous units and Corsairs can largely be ignored for Malekith until the late game when you're sprinkling in one or two to add some extra punch to your secondary armies. Druchii economy is all about managing your slaves and maximizing one or two provinces specifically for income. Daylight Denied not only buffs your best cash resources, but also your slave income, and should give you a strong clue as to where to best put your captives to work. Most Dark Shard upgrades will also boost your Dread Spears and Bleak Swords as well, and it's worth noting that while you'll tech out of those fairly quickly for your army, your garrisons still rely heavily on these units, so the bonuses can dramatically help with the inevitable slave uprisings. Speaking of slavery, let's talk about the Dark Elves and their less than ethical economy. Your income is based on how many slaves you store in a province, which also has a dramatic effect on your public order. Because of this, you'll want to ensure that all slaves are only going to a single province to start, one with buildings dedicated to help control that order and maximize profits. Stacking assassins in a province can also provide a hefty increase to your income, as well as an emergency assault units action that can cut down an uprising with ease. The other unique aspect to Druchii are the Black Arks, floating cities that can be used to support your armies and help provide constant pressure. These are incredibly powerful tools, and their bombardment abilities can easily turn the tide of battle. Once they've grown larger, they can consistently provide gold chevron troops during recruitment, so you'll always want to have one following your armies when they're available. My recommended army compositions often look like this. Druchii shine when blood has been spilled across the battlefield, so your army should focus on tying down the enemy and setting up for optimal flanks that engage alongside your murderous prowess ability. Spears and swords will clash against the enemy front line, holding them in place for as long as possible, while your other units get into position to do the damage. Dark Shards can trade very effectively against other units thanks to their shields, and the armor piercing of their crossbows let you focus down most cavalry before they can even reach your flanks. Witch Elves and Executioners are excellent damage dealers, but they don't stand up well in a one-on-one fight, so while your spears hold the line, these can flank around to hammer the anvil. If you're fighting Greenskins or Skaven, the Witch Elves' Rampage Poison is especially deadly, as their units won't be able to rout and regroup as easily. Using your fill spots for Reaper Bolt throwers works well, thanks to the synergies they get alongside of Dark Shards. And lastly, some cav or monsters can help break up the lines and give you access to more spells. The elves are known for their magic, and the Druchii are no exception. Under the tutelage of Mama Marathi, the Dark Elves get unique access to the lore of dark magic, an offensive school of spells that will keep you casting all battle long. Power of Darkness will keep your reserves high for the price of a little blood, so casting on big monsters and artillery will optimize the cost. Chillwind is good for helping out your spear line and works great against those frontline units, while Bladewind can dish out damage against cheap trash mobs that all blob together. Word of Pain will bring a high-tier regiment down to size so you can win the engagement, and then Doombolt can help focus down any single entity units, which is great for catching a fleeing hero or Hydra before they have a chance to regroup. Lastly, Soul Stealer does significant damage against a large mob of units, and lets you lifesteal back some of the damage, setting you up for another Power of Darkness and a near-endless supply of magic. On the campaign layer, you'll want to focus on securing Negaron through a mixture of military might and clever alliances. Anyone who's not Druchii are easy targets, so knock out the Skaven, Northmen, and Orcs ASAP, and keep an eye on what kind of alliances are forming between your brethren. Focus on winning favor with the other legendary lords, and making friends with their friends. If you can win Diplo points through mutual acquaintances, then take the opportunity to do so. And if you have mutual enemies, don't hesitate to join a war even if you're unlikely to participate. The AI still appreciates the gesture. Once the north is secure and your Black Arks are at sea, take back your ancestral home of Tor Anrock and start your invasion in earnest. Black Arks rule the sea, so use them to grab any treasure you can find and sack easy settlements for additional slave income. Having a single Ark harass the coast of Ulthuan or Bretonnia can net you a significant amount of income from battles, while turbo boosting your economy in the north. But don't forget, as Malekith, you're the front line against the Chaos invasion, so keep an eye on the clock and make sure to keep some armies at home when they arrive. Losing some cities to Chaos is generally inevitable, but if the provinces where you're stacking slaves get taken, you might find yourself unable to bankroll the invasion of Ulthuan. It's not easy finding allies as Druchii, so be careful where and when you pick your fights abroad. But on the bright side, if everyone ends up hating you, remember you can always have the warm embrace from the Sword of Cain. If you'd like to learn more about Total War Warhammer and how to play other factions, then hit that like and subscribe. Or you can come check me out live during the week over at twitch.tv/AgentNumberOne. My Warhammer 3 videos will arrive in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for the thrilling conclusion to the trilogy.